Good morning, everyone. So in this week's Torah portion, we have the story of Moshe Rabbeinu striking the rock to produce water and being punished by God that he cannot enter into the land of Israel. But the question is, why did Moshe Rabbeinu get punished so severely? So Maimonides says that it wasn't because he struck a rock, but it was because of his losing control, because he got angry at the Jewish people and he lashed out at the Jewish people and he said, "Listen up, you rebels, shall I produce water from this rock?" And then he struck the rock twice in anger. And that's when God said, okay, you're not suitable anymore, qualified to lead the Jewish people into the land of Israel. Joshua will have to take over. But the question is, this is not the first time the Jewish people complained about water. There were two prior incidents in the Torah over the 40 years where they clamored against Moses, complaining about the water wasn't sweet, it was bitter. And in every situation, Moses was able to pray to God and handle it with calm and with reasonable responses. And there were many other incidents of the Jewish people complaining. Why now did Moshe Rabbeinu lose his temper and get angry at the Jewish people and lash out in a way that is uncharacteristic of him? He had never done this before. And Rabbi Jonathan Sachs gives the following answer and insight. He says you have to read the prelude to the story of the water at the rock. He says, what does the Torah say? The Torah says that the Jewish people came to a place called Kadesh, and Miriam, the sister of Moses, passed away and was buried there. And it was after that that the Jewish people came crying that there was no water, and that's when Moshe Rabbeinu gets angry and lashes out at them in anger and says, "Listen up, you rebels," scolding them. That's when God says, "You're no longer fit to lead." And Rabbi Sachs says, think about the relationship between Moses and his sister Miriam, who he had just lost. Miriam was the one who advised her father to give birth to Moses, because Miriam's parents, Amram and Yocheved, stopped having children because Pharaoh said all the boys will be thrown in the Nile. And she came to her father and said, "Dad, you're worse than Pharaoh. Pharaoh only decreed death on the boys by condemning them to be drowned in the Nile. But you, by not having children with mommy, you're condemning death on boys and girls." And so the father and mother reunited and gave birth to Moses. And then when Moses was hidden in the Nile, it was Miriam, his sister, who stood by the Nile to watch over him. And when the daughter of Pharaoh, Batya, came and discovered the baby, she stepped forward and said, "Let me find the woman, the mother, to nurse him." And therefore, Miriam saved his life. And he had a very close connection to his sister Miriam, who was his only sister. And now when his sister died, Moses is grieving. He's bereaved from his sister. And Rabbi Sachs says when a person is grieving, they're fragile, they're vulnerable, they're not as composed as they normally are, and therefore they could be easily angered or triggered, and they could lose their calm and their composure and their control. And therefore Moshe Rabbeinu couldn't control his emotions when the Jewish people challenged him and attacked him, and he lashed out in anger. And so Rabbi Sachs says the story of the rock and the water is not just a story about a water and rock. It's about a story of the loving relationship between Moses and his sister, and the bond that he had, and about being able to be sensitive when people are going through emotional grief, to understand that they're vulnerable and fragile, and not cause them extra anguish and pain. Last week there was a very moving funeral in Israel, the funeral of Leora Argamani, the mother of Noah. We all know the remarkable story how Noah was abducted on October 7th with her boyfriend, and her boyfriend is still in captivity. And the IDF led a mission into Gaza and released Noah and 3 other hostages. And tragically, the commander of the mission, Arnon Zamora, died, gave up his life, sacrificed his life in that mission. And when they came to rescue Noah, the first question she asked the IDF soldier was, "Is my mother still alive?" Because her mother was dying of cancer. And the soldier said, "Yes, your mother's still alive." And then she looked around the room at the faces of all the other soldiers to see their reaction. And she said, "Are you sure?" And they said, "Yes, we're sure." And at that point she got up and left with them. And it reminded me of Joseph, who, when he reveals himself to his brothers, his first question is my father still alive? The first question Noah had is my mother still alive? That's what she was thinking about for 8 months in captivity. And she came home to Israel, and she was able to be reunited with her mother. And 2 weeks later, her mother, Noah, Leora Argamani, passed away from cancer. And who is Leora Argamani? She's an Asian woman from Wuhan, China. And in the 60s, she came to Israel on a student exchange program and met her husband, Yaakov, and they fell in love. And she became a convert, a righteous convert to Judaism. From Wuhan, China, she became a Jewish woman in Israel, became part of the destiny of the Jewish people. And she raised a wonderful daughter, Noah, who is now uniting the nation with a message of love. And this young woman stood up to speak at the funeral of her mother, Leora, the daughter of Abraham, and said, Ima, thank you for being my best friend in life. And she said, thank you for waiting for me to come back so I could spend the last weeks of your life with you. And then she said, thank you, God, that I'm home so my father doesn't have to be alone, because she's the only child. So my father doesn't have to be alone in this world. When I look at this young woman who's grieving for the loss of her mother, her boyfriend in captivity, she just came out of 8 months in being a hostage. And what are her words? Her words are words of love, of compassion, of kindness, of gratitude, of focusing on the good. The Jewish people have been grieving since October 7th. So much loss, so much pain, so much tragedy, so much heartache. Just yesterday, a beautiful couple traveling in their car in the north were struck down by a Hezbollah rocket. A beautiful couple killed in their car. But what has come out of the Jewish people in this grief, in this bereavement, in this tragedy? Not anger, not hatred, but love and kindness and compassion. We've never been prouder to be Jews, never been stronger, never been more loving and more united. This is the remarkable tale of the Jewish people since October 7th, that in our grief, not only have we not become weak, or God forbid, vulnerable and susceptible to the worst tendencies in human nature, but on the contrary, the best of our characteristics has come out. This is a tremendous tribute to the Jewish people. We will overcome this enemy as we have every other enemy, but we will have a new appreciation for the goodness that lies deep within the Jewish people and every Jewish soul. Have a wonderful day.